Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast, to the final instalment of off-seasoning in the 2024-2025 off-season. Can't believe we're there. It's a bit sad almost. It's like end of an era, sort of. I mean, I know there's 2 more weeks before the season starts, but we are well planned for these ones, unlike the last 4 months of content. But yeah, end of an era for off-seasoning. So we're rounding out all the news that you need to be caught up with for one final time before we head solely into looking at what's ahead for the rest of 2025.
Can I say we've made it?
Almost.
Yes, it turned out to just be off-seasoning, but 2 weeks to go as this drops until practice in St. Pete. We have prediction and preview episodes coming up, always 2 of our favourites. So yeah, buckle up, it's almost time.
Yes, apologies, it's slightly late. We were trying to work something out, didn't quite fall through, so we are back to off-seasoning. So what we're going to do today, as I said, a bit of news we want to sort of subtly end the off-seasoning with so we can fully focus on previews and predictions in the upcoming weeks. We're going to go back to our livery tier list because we did finish it at the time, but there's been I believe 7 since. So bit of updating to do there. As usual, we'll of course go over the history and pretty much that's it, I think. So we'll start off with the major IndyCar news. Now, so majority of you, this might not be interesting, but we will share it anyway, which is a major leadership change at the top of IndyCar. So this was announced a couple of days ago since recording. So it's a good job we recorded late, otherwise you wouldn't have had this news. So there we are. Maybe it was a blessing in disguise, is I think what we should say. But the main news is Doug Bowles has been named the president of IndyCar. So if you didn't know who Doug Bowles is, still is the president of Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Sort of a bit of a living legend as Doug Bowles. Seems like quite a chill guy. He's replacing Jay Fry, who was the previous president of IndyCar. So Doug Bowles now serving 2 roles. And then just for the rest of your information, Mark Sibler is the Senior Vice President, IndyCar Competition and Operations. Carl Novak is IndyCar's Vice President of Officiating and Race Control. Alex Dameron has been named Chief Marketing Officer, IndyCar, whilst also continuing as Vice President of Corporate Communications for Penske Entertainment. And Louis Kissinger will be promoted to General Manager of Indianapolis Motor Speedway Operations. So quite a big change in the figure in the senior space of IndyCar. I know on track that probably won't make too much of a difference, at least in the short term for people, but we just must make you aware because it was some major news across the week.
Well, there's a lot of strands to this, I would say. I think, first of all, it's pretty strange timing. It's very close to the start of the season, obviously, within the time that this was announced, just shy of being 2 weeks from cars hitting the track in St. Pete, and obviously the whole circus kind of heading to St. Pete. So, yeah, it's very close to the season after, obviously, a very long off-season of 4, 5, almost 6 months for this to have happened. So I guess it kind of feels like it's too close to the season for this to really have been something that's been in the long-term plans from IndyCar and Penske Entertainment. I mean, the terminology that's kind of been used in a lot of the reporting around this is that Jay Fry has been fired from his role. I mean, I think just to give a bit of background, he's been in this role for essentially around a decade. He's not a Penske guy. He was already in place when Penske Entertainment, Roger Penske, took over control of the IndyCar series. So, I mean, I was listening to a kind of bumper podcast episode that Marshall Pruitt did, and one of the suggestions that he made is someone like Mark Miles is a yes man who will do what Penske want. And there's kind of an implication there that Jay Fry is not necessarily that. He's maybe more willing to challenge the series ownership, essentially. I mean, you've got to think something must have happened behind the scenes for this move to fire Jay and bring in Doug Bowles to happen kind of seemingly so abruptly. You know, maybe this was a long-standing bit of tension that kind of reached a climax. That also seems like it could be feasible. You know, it kind of just reached a crescendo if they have got differing views on things. Obviously, bringing Doug Bowles in kind of helps to streamline that, you know, IMS and IndyCar almost as one, obviously with Bowles being in charge at IMS. It was interesting that Marshall Pruitt also said that multiple other people were offered this job late last year. So that does imply that this has been coming. But again, why has it happened now? It's slightly strange. It's slightly strange. It doesn't really set you up in the best possible way so close to the season. I know Mark Miles has been quoted by some media saying that, this hasn't been in the works for months. But you've got to think there must have been some thoughts that this was going to happen. All of this said, like, even if the job was offered to other people, I think Doug Bowles feels like an excellent pick. I mean, maybe he's been appointed in a slightly scattergun way if there were other options, maybe external to the IndyCar realm that were maybe approached. But I have confidence in Doug as the president. He's so popular and he's done such a good job at IMS. I mean, just look at last year, for instance, the Indy 500, the weather delays. That was Doug Bowles and his team that meant that all the fans stayed safe and all the fans stayed in for the delayed Indy 500 start. He's very hands-on. He engages. I'd be confident that, he may lead the series in a way that maybe it does engage fans more than there has been in terms of that sort of engagement. I think there's been a lot of criticism for Jay Fry in some quarters. I think actually he deserves a lot of credit for the job that he has done. He's really pioneered aspects such as safety in quite a tricky time for the series across the last 10 years. And, there's now a very healthy car count. Teams are interested. Obviously, new teams are now kind of barred by the charter system. And I think you could also level criticism that, for instance, there are limited engine manufacturers interested in joining the series to add to Chevy and Honda. I think another aspect maybe, and this has been mentioned, is that growth in popularity generally has been quite stunted. It's been more limited than maybe would have been ideal. So maybe Doug Bowles, who he is quite well versed on that commercial side compared to, Jay Fry worked on the commercial side before he was in this role, but he was very much a kind of competition oriented leader when he was in this role as the series president. He had maybe the technical knowledge that Doug Bowles doesn't have. And obviously this is quite a key crossroads for IndyCar. Bowles will have to get up to speed on, stuff like the project to have a new car in 2027. You've obviously got the Fox deal as well, which is another reason why I think I keep referring to this as an important crossroads for the series. I think it'll be a lot to take on for him, being the kind of leader at IMS and IndyCar. He's clearly a very personable guy. He's very likable. I think he's quite a fitting leader for what does feel like a bit of a new era for IndyCar, and hopefully he can be a guy to really kind of harness the growth potential, because ultimately Fox are not going to grow the series alone. This takes work from IndyCar as well. But yeah, there's a lot of big stuff for him to get up to speed within a very short period, and it's a very big job. But I think he's a good man for the job.
I'm glad this episode is going out later, because we have got more news, which is the news that we've sort of all been waiting for, which is the confirmation of Rinus VeeKay to line up alongside Jacob Abel at Dale Coyne Racing in the number 18 for entry Archie. You must be absolutely delighted for your little friend Rinus VeeKay. You've been waxing lyrical about all off season, just demanding he gets a seat, and he's finally got one. Yeah,
it's not exactly the upwards move away from Ed Carpenter Racing that I kind of was urging to happen, kind of, and felt like maybe VeeKay deserved, but he's certainly going to be in a role here at Dale Coyne Racing where, he's leading a team forward that, there's no two ways about it. And Jacob Abel spoke a bit about it when we spoke to him a week or two ago, that, the team has struggled, and it was a difficult season last year, obviously, with so many different drivers. I think a big thing for them, having Abel on board and having VeeKay on board, they have a stable lineup for the season. And that's going to be so beneficial, because it doesn't benefit anybody when you are chopping and changing, apart from, maybe a driver evaluation standpoint. And none of the drivers that they fielded last year are even in their lineup for this year anyway. So yeah, I think it's just good to see VeeKay in the field. I think it would have been, he didn't deserve to have lost a seat full stop. This whole thing about he's always finished between 12th and 14th in the standings. That's still pretty good going, given how competitive this series is, given some of the struggles that Ed Carpenter Racing endured during his time there. that's you've got to give him the credit for that. And it will be good to see him at a different team, just for the fact of, there is that unknown factor about VeeKay having been at the same team for 5 years. It's hard to kind of weigh up how good he is. He's always beaten his teammates, and he's got to beat Jacob Abel this year, obviously being a rookie. But it'll be interesting just to see him in different colours, and whether it's, I guess, more of a proving ground for him. I think he is a guy that I feel like deserves to be in a seat that, or at least I want to see him in a seat that gives the potential to regularly fight for podiums, wins. But yeah, just seeing him in a different environment will be interesting.
But he keeps his foot in the door, though, which is always the most important thing, because it's obviously much harder to get an opportunity once you're out than once you're in. So from his perspective, obviously having any seat is way better than having no seat in this scenario. And I mean, even if it's obviously a step down, maybe performance-wise, I still think it's more beneficial than another year at Ed Carpenter Racing, where he finishes between 12th and 14th, and neither sets the world alight nor does anything wrong. Because, I mean, he's almost stuck in a bit of purgatory with VeeKay. He wasn't doing anything wrong, but was there going to be that progression if he just stayed the way he was? And obviously, it's quite unfortunate where the team have made so many changes this year in Ed Carpenter Racing, where he just didn't fit in their future plans. But it was definitely time for a change for him, and he's obviously going to play quite a significant role in guiding Jacob Abel. Obviously, has got some experience helping Christian Rasmussen out in the team last year. It's quite interesting that Coyne seemed to have 2 drivers who aren't huge on budget. Obviously, Abel's got a bit of budget, but VeeKay's one to be known who doesn't have absolute masses of budget to provide. So it's good to see that they're not relying on the rotating door. I mean, there were suggestions that they might split the entry, but not on this occasion, which is obviously, I guess, from people like Hunter McElroy and Toby Sauer, it's a bit frustrating, because they proved themselves probably capable last year, but obviously don't really have the resume or the funding to do so. But from a team perspective, after such a turbulent year, and they haven't had a great couple of years, VeeKay is obviously a guy who will be expected to lead them back forward and closer to the front of the field, and obviously that is going to be a responsibility he's going to have to take on at bringing Coyne back to a more competitive position, and obviously supporting Jacob Abel in doing that.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously been a lot of talk about Coyne possibly being another team that, I think Dale's had a unique view to the charters, possibly bringing in kind of investors and maybe some co-ownership in the team as well. So maybe that is what has helped to facilitate having 2 drivers that they've kind of been able to choose almost, which is ultimately how it should be in an ideal world. And it has allowed them to pick up who I believe in VeeKay is probably the best free agent that was out there. And I think, unfortunately for Coyne, they have become, or they just are, a team that are viewed in many ways just as a stepping stone. They don't have the might and the resources of your top teams. So to hold on to a driver like VeeKay in the long term will be difficult. Maybe if they have investment, could it be something like what Ed Carpenter Racing are touting this year as being a real chance at an upturn, possibly. But no, I think we've seen it with drivers in the infancy of their IndyCar careers, and VeeKay's not necessarily at that point now, but still Coyne is a good kind of, just a stepping stone to allow you to stay relevant, really. And it sounds harsh in some ways, but I think that's ultimately what VeeKay's long-term, I guess, plans will consist of.
So now the grid is complete. Apart from the Indianapolis 500, we've still got some question marks there. The suggestions Catherine Legg could be in a third car there. The Bourdais, Johnson, Brady superpower team probably isn't going to happen. Doesn't discount a potential 4th Ganassi entry, though, of somebody else. But the supposed super team that was saying all this is going to happen doesn't look particularly like. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but
yeah, I mean, I think kind of some of the parties involved have been asked. I can't remember exactly who. I remember something from Sebastian Bourdais saying we'll have to ask Chip.
Johnson was asked, I think, and
I think they've put it down to just being a rumor, essentially. For now.
I think Johnson said that he hasn't really had a serious conversation about it, so it's not really possible. It's not really it's not impossible, but I don't think it's likely. RLL might put a fourth out. We haven't really heard anything about maybe Takuma Sato coming back. He said Prema could explore Romain Grosjean. Juncos unlikely. Ed Carpenter obviously have Carpenter already announced. Going beyond that, so Ganassi might look at another one. Wait, probably could, but you deem it unlikely. So a few still to decide. We are with VeeKay. We're now up to 33, I believe we are, because we have Andretti. We have Andretti, Larson, Hunter Ray, Harvey, Carpenter, and Cash and Evers is the 6. So we need one more for Bump Day to return. And let's hope it does. Whoever form that comes in, let's certainly hope it does. Speaking of Fox, you've had the last ad, this time Pato Award. Now we've had 3. What's your favourite?
I would say my favourite. I mean, I will preface it by saying they are all really, really impressive, and nice. This is all stuff that we just have not been accustomed to seeing. I think my favourite's still the Newgarden one. I think just in terms of the actual production, it seemed like there was kind of the most stuff for that. I mean, they only shot these over a singular day in LA, and the outcome's very impressive. Really, really impressive. I would say the Newgarden one. I think having Brady in there and just some of the other feature, the other nuggets that they kind of played on. And again, it was a very similar kind of fun theme for O'Ward and Palou as well, kind of tapping into their personalities. But I would say Newgardens. And I think maybe it is because it was the first and it was really like, whoa. And then the others kind of just followed suit, and not that we knew what to expect, they were still super impressive, but the Newgarden one really had that wow factor.
Fine.
Your view? Newgarden,
definitely. Yeah, I just think Newgardens was very him. I like the hedge and the gasoline aftershave perfume thingy, the Tom Brady thing.
He really embraced it. I really liked how he embraced it as well, I feel.
I mean, Awards was what was good. I mean, they're all good in comparison to what IndyCar had before, but all 3 of them played at the Super Bowl as well. There's like a new tire ad they did. Something worked out. The sponsor slots were worth something like 35 million in Super Bowl advertising, and I mean that's probably been IndyCar's marketing budget for about the last 14 decades or something. So that's probably the most money IndyCar have ever spent, even though they've got it all for free. So that's, we were obviously speaking about Fox quite a lot, so it beat it to death. But obviously the promotion they're doing is quite big for the series. There's been evidence that Google searches have significantly increased for IndyCar. And all the paths are very encouraging. I mean, the promotion's been done. It's making fun of personalities, which is obviously just seeing cars go on a track isn't maybe as appealing to some people, especially new fans, as having these personalities, which you can sort of get used to. So good stuff again from Fox, now showing it in the Super Bowl, where there is obviously a lot of attention. So only time will tell if those numbers will convert on the 2nd of March.
It's actually quite funny because going back a couple of weeks, there were reports coming out that this Award commercial was going to debut during the Super Bowl, and that in itself was super cool. But it actually turned out to be just these IndyCar adverts were being played from the very start of pre-game coverage through to sort of actually being played, all 3 of them, during the game up until halftime, which is obviously a big part of the Super Bowl, the halftime show. But yeah, as you say, companies pay several millions for a spot to advertise during the Super Bowl. You have, I mean, I think it's over kind of, maybe it's worth giving this a quick Google as I ramble on here, but I think it's over 100 million people end up tuning into the Super Bowl, which is an incredible amount of eyes on IndyCar. And I think, Fox are taking very good care of their new property. I think for these early stages, the amount that they are pushing it is really impressive. And this is, the amount of eyes that are being exposed to Alex Palou, to Joseph Newgarden, to Pato O'Ward. I think Palou's was shown before kickoff. O'Ward's was during the first quarter. Obviously, a time of there's quite a lot of hype during the first quarter as the game's getting underway. Newgarden we didn't see them obviously being over in the UK, but was in one of the slots right ahead of the halftime show, which obviously went pretty viral. Newgarden's has that significance in terms of American football, obviously having Brady there. He actually met and spent some time with Tom Brady as well, which is pretty cool. Having Brady on board, as we've said, is big stuff. My dad was actually out in Chicago watching the Super Bowl in a bar, and he said that it felt like there were constantly IndyCar adverts, which I guess is a good thing because he's not really an IndyCar fan. So the fact that he noticed that is pretty cool. And people will have noticed, Fox are really shoving these adverts in front of people, and they're repeating them. And that's great. People will get to know, they'll get to recognize, I think, these personalities as, Fox are doing with these adverts, showcasing these individual drivers. But I really like the belief that they evidently have in the property that they have inherited. I think that's really good to see. And it can't be understated how exciting this is, because IndyCar has not been marketed like this. And finally, it feels like we are getting the attention that it deserves.
Pretty cool. I mean, hopefully people enjoyed the ads. I mean, they're much better than any other IndyCar ad I've ever watched. So if anyone's ever seen a Newgarden milk gimp ad, big upgrade on 9 years ago, whatever it was. So
I have the viewership number, by the way, for the Super Bowl. It was 127.7 million US viewers across television and streaming platforms.
Nice. Well, hopefully they convert it. That was the most important thing. I mean, if they do all this work and they don't get any more viewers, that'd be a shame. But as we'll find out post St. Petersburg, which would be obviously quite significant. Talking of leadership changes, like we did right at the start, there was one at Team Penske a couple of weeks ago. It's not really too interesting, but I'll let you know anyway. Tim Cindric, who was the team president, stepped back from his sort of day-to-day leadership role. He does remain president of the team's IndyCar efforts and that sort of thing, and Ron Ruzicki will carry on his role with the team. I believe Cindric is also staying in his race engineering role as well, I'd imagine. So
yes,
not too much changing there, but obviously sort of the most senior figurehead at Team Penske is slightly stepping back from his role, but nothing too significant in the IndyCar scheme of things.
Yeah, he'll still be present on Newgarden's stand. It's just kind of his wider role in the organisation that, I think he's felt that it's time to kind of par things back a little bit. But from an IndyCar side, there won't be too much of a noticeable difference, really.
Other news: Juncos Hollinger Racing have dropped out of Indy Next. They had a driver announced several months ago, end of the year, and they've stopped their Indy Next commitments to focus fully on IndyCar, which is interesting. So they sort of did like a half entry last year in Indy Next with Ricardo Scotto and obviously Lindsay Brewer, who gave a lot of attention there, but. Yeah, they've just dropped back, which is slightly interesting. Because they only came back to Indy Next last year and already dropped out, so it didn't last long. But we'll see if that fares any better. I mean, yeah, they to be fair, they weren't that bad last year at an IndyCar, were they? So maybe a bit of a surprise. But I guess it's a small team with not many resources, so you want to allocate them towards IndyCar.
I feel like it's a crunch year for them because they've had to bring on board two drivers. I mean, Stingray Robb obviously paying for that seat, Connor Daly likewise, and obviously Daly had that audition, did really well at the back end of last year, performed really well in that car, especially on the, it was majorly ovals apart from Portland, where he was relatively competitive, having not been on a road or street course for a while. But they're clearly in, the fact that they are having to bring two drivers on board that are paying for their seats. Shows you the kind of situation that team's in. So it feels like an important year. And I guess it makes sense in that respect for them to be putting all their eggs in the IndyCar basket. Yeah.
It's just interesting that they committed to it and have since dropped out. So maybe some situations changed. I don't know. It's interesting. Anyway, so Tony this weekend and Helio Castroneves will be racing, which is pretty cool. He is in the Project 91, which SVG won in Chicago, obviously a couple of years ago. I think that was the last time that car was actually entered. And it's a bit of a weird rule in NASCAR where he's guaranteed entry, even though he shouldn't be guaranteed entry because he's Helio Castroneves and he's got like worldwide acclaim. So he's allowed into the race anyway, which is controversial in NASCAR, so I'm not getting involved in it. But I mean, not too much to say apart from good luck, Helio. We hope IndyCar's represented well. Daly did the Daytona 500 a couple of years ago, didn't he? I can't remember how he got on. But
he was in a not very competitive entry and his car was very broken.
Finished 29th, Daly.
He qualified, I believe, due to someone else's misfortune, but his car was basically just bouncing all weekend.
He qualified 34th that year, which isn't actually that hideous. So
I just recall this car bouncing like extreme amounts.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, best of luck to Helio. Hopefully he does well. Hopefully he does IndyCar proud. You never know. Maybe more crossover in the next couple of years. He's most likely to do a crossover for Ferrucci probably, or something like that.
I would say Ferrucci.
Any other names you can?
McLaughlin.
Yeah, we may quite possibly. Possible. Yeah, Penske link there. And Power Newgarden definitely would not do it. Who else might do it? Graham Rail at some point in his career, I reckon, might get in there. Who else has got a NASCAR operation? I don't know. Yeah, McLaughlin was most likely with like a track house or somebody.
I mean, like Gamebridge are involved. Herter doesn't feel like he'd do that.
No. Yeah, I don't think it's really anybody else. Somebody else stands out as like somebody willing to try. Oh, well, I mean, Award maybe at some point, but not in the next few years, I wouldn't imagine. I don't know. Interesting.
I could see Newgarden giving it a go. He's done SRX, I think, in the past.
Can't see him doing it in his IndyCar career though. Just my opinion. Maybe once he retires. Right, what we're going to do now is we're going to do the liveries as we sort of started last week. So we said we'll make a tier list for all the liveries this year, and we've got 7 more since. So we'll absolutely do some more. I mean, this will be the last time we do it until post St. Petersburg. So let's give it a whirlwind, shall we? Right, here is the tier list from last time. Sorry for all the adverts on the side. They aren't paid by us, so we do apologise. Anyway, Hunkos, I believe it was Rob, was leading the way with the RLLs in C tier. So we got the 3 Andretti's, the 3 Ganassis, and Newgarden's shell livery wasn't really confirmed, but Joey Logano's Daytona 500 livery is pretty much the same. Obviously, it's in a NASCAR, so an IndyCar. And it sort of inadvertently said that Newgarden's was returning. Anyway, I think that's a straight S tier livery.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's one of the best liveries I've ever seen in racing.
In Logano's one, I think it looks even better on a NASCAR. Logano's one looks incredible, but yeah, it sort of the fade from red to yellow to white looks really clean. So yeah, great livery. Man. No discussions there. Right, we'll get on to let's go on to the Andretti's. Colson Herta's is pretty much the same as last year, but he's got some really random red stripes, which I don't like. And obviously they've done it on all 3 of cars where the sort of red strip on the aero screen is the same and on the red strip on the side pod as well. But it just sticks out a bit like a sore thumb on a yellow and black car. Doesn't really suit it. I liked the sort of old Gamebridge one where it was more yellow and black. You didn't really have the white in it. And I mean, it's okay, but it's not as good as I think it was last year.
Yeah, I can back that. Maybe bottom of B.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And then we'll get on to Kyle Kirkwood's Chili's livery. I mean, he's got the Chili's livery, but I'm sure he's only been announced for 1 race with Chili's, which is St. Petersburg. So I'm sure there'll be more from Kirkwood, but yeah, it's only been announced for actually 1 car so far. For this Chili's entry in 1 race so far. Pretty funky. I actually quite like it. Bit of yellow, bit of black, tiny bit of blue, bit of red. I mean, it's sort of just standard IndyCar livery. They all seem to be white, blue, and red pretty much. But yeah. I like it. Yeah. It's nothing really special, but I think it's nice.
Top of B, maybe. I feel like there's almost a bit too much black on it.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah, maybe I can agree with that. But there's not too much red. The overview from the top, I think, is really good. Ahead of the Hunkos.
Yeah, we'll put him ahead of the Hunkos.
Cool. And Ericsson's. Now, I'm not really a fan of Ericsson's. I mean, there's too much black on it, and then the red sponsor on the side really just stick out like a bit of a sore thumb because you've got a little black bit. And then the white, I'm not a fan. Doesn't really all fit in together very well, I don't think, unfortunately.
I would actually say I prefer this to Kirkwood's, just for the fact that
To Kirkwood's.
I would actually say so. Yeah, I think the issue with Kirkwood's is it's a red and white car that they've got too much black on. With Ericsson, it's a red and black car essentially, and I
think they've got too much white on it. I don't like the white on it as well. Either.
Interesting.
We're mixed. We probably should put it about here then if we're mixed.
Yeah, put it middle of B. Let's do it.
Right, that's interesting because I'm not really a fan of it. But okay, right, we'll go on to the three Ganassis. Pilot, it's pretty much exactly the same as last year. It might be marginally different, but I think it's still the same. DHL livery is quite iconic, and I think it's quite good. But I'm almost too used to it now. But I still think it might be worthy of A tier.
Yeah, I agree, and I think they've actually Ganassi have made it look even nicer than it looks at Andretti with the kind of more red on the front than when obviously Andretti had DHL for a good while.
Maybe
put it
bottom.
Maybe split the premise.
Okay, fine. And then Dixon's basically the same.
Dixon's just has more orange this year.
I mean, yeah. Honestly, I think it's obviously iconic, but I don't think it's an outstanding. It was a good livery, but I don't think it's anything special.
Top of B then?
Below Kirkwood, above Kirkwood?
Above Kirkwood, I would say.
Okay, fine. We're going to have to reorder this at some point because...
Yeah, I think we probably will.
Maybe we might bump Herta down for the minute.
Yeah, okay.
And the Simpsons. Simpsons is basically what we've saved this for because his is absolutely outrageous. It is completely different to the one he had last year. And it's a bit of a weird one because from what angle you look at the car looks a different colour. So I know this isn't a particularly good example on the screen you see here, but you can see it's obviously a bit purple and a bit red. On one side of it, it looks this purple. One side of it, it looks red. Another side of it, it looks blue. Another side looks white or something. You'll have to search this up because, as I said, from sort of every angle, it looks a different colour. So you sort of need to see it from every angle. It's one which I feel will divide opinion. It's a bit of a mixed match of colours, of a bit of yellow, red, a little bit of blue. But I really like this.
I'm a big fan as well. I think it's extremely distinctive, and that's what you want from a livery, right?
Yeah, I mean, you want to stand out. I mean, if the sponsors want you to be seen, so I'd argue this is top of S tier.
You see, I would go S, but below New Gardens, just because I think the shell livery is iconic. Unless you want to put Simpson to the top, just because New Gardens is the same as it was.
Yeah, Simpsons is so different. I think we need to give it a bit more benefit. But yeah, I mean that might change. Might be a bit of recency bias. But my word, I'm in love with that livery. That's such a cool livery.
I can't wait to see it. I wish we had like a night race. Seeing that under the lights would be so cool.
Yeah, it's just the fact it's so different to what it was previously. I think is what makes it good because, like, obviously we could have got an inkling from his fire seat, but even so, it really does stand out. So awesome livery, love that. Keep it up, Ganassi. I mean, Pilot will probably have some alternate liveries, but yeah, keep it up. Cool. So that's all that done, and I guess we will end off with history. Now, a bit of a rough one. Couldn't find too much. We're in the early phase of the 1990s, which is when we sort of start. You know, the information's there. It's hard. It's almost hard to find these stories in some ways because in the 1950s, there's nothing else to tell apart from these random stories that are found about people drinking wine or getting cars out of the parking lot or whatever it is. So 1990s, we're still in the middle of a split. Again, we're not knowledgeable enough to really explain this without you getting confused. So we won't bother. 1990 saw the fastest Indianapolis 500 at the time by quite some distance, as Arie Luyendyk won the Indianapolis 500 in a time 4 hours less than the first one in 1911. Emerson Fittipaldi led the first 92 laps before he had a tyre problem. It was only actually 3 lap leaders that race, and they finished 1, 2, 3. 1991 saw quite a close battle at the end, and the winner, well, it was quite a big battle between Michael Andretti and Rick Mears. Eventually, it was won by Mears with a move on the outside of turn 1, and he became the third full-time winner of the Indianapolis 500 in 1991. 1992 is quite famous for being the coldest Indianapolis 500 on to date, which caused loads of different accidents, which I'll get onto a little bit later. But Michael Andretti, this is probably his closest time to win the Indianapolis 500. He had a failed fuel pump after he led for 160 the first 189 laps. And then Unser won the race. Alonso Jr. in a very close finish with Scott Goodyear. 1993, we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, was Emerson Fittipaldi. This was the one he famously drank orange juice and is rather disrespected at Indianapolis now. He forfeited the money for drinking the orange juice and he's still booed by fans at Indy to this day. So he's very, very unpopular, is Emerson Fittipaldi.
Imagine telling that to someone who didn't know about the tradition, that he is so despised almost for drinking some orange juice.
What isn't though? He actually, well, there's no worse. I mean, actually still drank the milk afterwards, but it's just so despised drinking the orange juice first that people don't really remember it. Emerson Fittipaldi was on back-to-back actually, the year afterwards, but he had a damaged suspension after a crash late on, and eventually this was won by Alonso Jr. Wait, who was very close to being lapped, but he went on to score a second win in 3 years at the Indianapolis 500 with an engine which was quite controversial because they was built in secrecy for the event and then never used again, which is quite controversial. Anyway, bit of a crazy period, and Emerson Fittipaldi is still not very light in the Indianapolis 500 for drinking that milk. Anyway, I'll come back to 1992, and that's probably known by a lot of you, but I had no idea, so therefore it still counts. Roberto Guerrero, you mentioned him last week. I can't remember why. When I say last week, it was a couple of weeks ago. You mentioned Roberto Guerrero for something. I can't remember what. Anyway, Roberto Guerrero, we come to 1992. He was pretty dominant, okay? So he was very quick all the way through. From day one, he seemed to won the cars to beat. He was upping the speed day by day, leading the speed charts every single day. Guerrero was dominant. Come pole day, fastest practice lap, fastest qualifying lap, fastest qualifying run. Guerrero takes pole quite comfortably for the 500. No big stories there. However, coming to lead the field to green, I'm sure Roberto Guerrero must have been very excited, taking the pole for Indianapolis 500. Well, not quite, because on the second parade lap, Guerrero warmed up his tyres, put a bit of throttle on to, sort of warm up those tyres, get them a little bit warm before the race, and his back end whipped around and he hit the wall and he didn't start. So pretty embarrassing. Someone else did it. So a man named Philip Gash also did the same thing afterwards. He just lost it on cold tyres on the parade lap and spun into the turn 4 apron. But yeah, Guerrero hit the wall on, not even on like a restart. It was literally the parade lap, hit the wall. His suspension was so badly damaged, he couldn't start the race. So,
after
crazy.
all the preparations, imagine.
And he was so quick all month. And yeah, never made the start because of. Imagine he will never live that down. He will never. Imagine how angry he'd be yourself, even to this day, over a mistake like that. Because he finished second in 1987 and 1984, which you might have mentioned. I believe it was actually his first pole at Indy. I think it was his only pole at Indianapolis, and he threw it away on the parade lap. Oh dear! Wow, how embarrassing! Imagine if that happened nowadays. People would go berserk. I'm sure they went berserk at the time. We just didn't know. Interesting thing about Roberto Guerrero as well, I found in 1988, he was sponsored by the Church of Scientology as one of his sponsors, which is rather bizarre. Maybe the most bizarre IndyCar sponsor of all time. More bizarre than Polka Dot, maybe, being sponsored by the Church of Scientology. Anyway, Roberto Guerrero is like a fascinating IndyCar driver. And early 1990s was when Ayrton Senna also tested an IndyCar at Firebird International Raceway. And I can't really confirm this, but there's reports that McLaren actually, their F1 team tested on the Phoenix Oval for like a sponsor thing. So I don't know why, but McLaren's F1 team tested at an oval. Anyway, another thing I found in 1991 is Mario Andretti crashed into a tow truck in Detroit in 1991. The truck was just picking up another car, and Mario Andretti just drove straight into it. I mean, it was going very slowly, but yeah, I mean, it's all the end of the original Detroit Grand Prix on the streets, and obviously returns to the streets in 2023. But yeah, that was rather embarrassing. Sort of hit the nail in the coffin when Mario Andretti just crashed into a recovery vehicle, which stops on track. So, bit of a weird period. But yeah, there you have it. Interesting period for IndyCar. Some funny stuff in there. And We will finish this history segment eventually. Whether it comes after St. Petersburg, it will be done. But there are interesting stories for this week. But for this week, right, is it the final edition of off-seasoning 2024-2025? It's been a struggle at times, but we've tried our best to give you a nice variety of content. And hopefully you have certainly enjoyed it. I'm sure after St. Petersburg and between Thermal, there will be more off-season content mid-season, in-season content with the way season always starts really slowly, doesn't it? And we're getting content in those few weeks, but we will obviously find something to do them. As we said, next week we are going to be doing season predictions, which was one of my favourite episodes last year. So I'm very much looking forward to this one, and we're going to be doing obviously the weird and the wonderful like we did last year. Some serious, some not so serious. This year we have done it so the not so serious predictions will actually be trackable, unlike last year where they weren't, unfortunately. But this year they will be trackable. We're going to be joined by our good friend James Scott again next week. So it's going to be 3 of us on the podcast next week. It should be released on Wednesday. So again, apologies, it is a bit later next week, but aiming for hopefully Wednesday next week. And the week after that, we'll be back for the preview, and where we'll go in team by team looking at the 2025 season, and we'll end the following week. We'll be having a race to discuss, believe it or not. I mean, time's gone by almost too quickly. I mean, everyone complains off seasoning is a slog, but it's actually gone by quite quickly.
It's gone so quickly. I mean, it's been nearly half a year, hasn't it? But it's I'm looking forward to setting ourselves up for embarrassment doing our predictions next week. And soon enough, we'll be back on track with our Tuesday posting schedule.
Yes. And before you know it, we'll be ready to have predictions, and then we'll be back next year with predictions for you. Anyway, for this week, that's all we got. Please stay tuned for next week. It's going to be an excellent episode. It's always great fun to do the predictions, especially with the 3 of us on it. But for this week, thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.